probably those two things have fed each other. That's just the bikes get better, so we build more trails. So we want better bikes, and it's
Some people call it a vicious cycle. I call it a virtuous cycle.
yes, exactly, a fun cycle.
Welcome to the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast. I'm Matthew Pioro, and with me on this episode is mountain bike editor Terry McKall. Welcome, Terry.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back, Terry. And listeners, as you probably guessed, when Terry's here, it's time to talk gear. That's right. Terry is here to tell us about a new bike. Or is it 3 bikes? Maybe it's 4 bikes. Terry, you'll explain all in just a second. So Terry, Trek just launched the new Fuel. Tell me about that bike. What's new?
Well, compared to the last time we reviewed Trek's trail bike, everything and kind of not much at all.
What?
Well, Trek starts with the Fuel EX, a platform that we really liked when we wrote it last time, and makes some small but really important updates to make the frame better. Then, and this is the completely different part, offers kits to make some pretty big changes to the bike. You can take it from the standard 145 travel with a 150 fork to a mullet, all the way up to a 160 travel version that looks a lot like the last generation of Trek's Slash enduro bike. To do that, it involves changing a rocker link and a shock mount, and in some cases, a whole new fork. That's not exactly a trail side change. No one's carrying an extra fork in their backpack when they ride. It's more of a once a season type thing, or maybe just getting to pick a slightly different version of the Fuel off the bat instead of having to make some of those changes yourself.
All right, so let me get that's a lot going on. So we have I remember your reviews about the Fuel EX and also the Fuel EXE. That's the e-bike version, the pedal assist version. So we've gone from this trail bike, the EX, and then we've added, or Trek has added, 2 other versions of it, or 2 other builds, 2 other platforms. And as you mentioned, you can switch between them. It sounds like this is a bit more complicated than, I don't know, even adjusting a suspension link or something. This requires a few more tools. However, it does sound quite versatile.
Yeah, I mean, adjusting the suspension is part of the change, as we talked about in the podcast with Ross and Dylan. So we'll let them get into the details of that. But it is a pretty big change. It's not just like a little flip chip anymore. And yeah, we're testing 2 of these bikes, the EX version and the LX version, to get at maybe why Trek has gone this way. And we'll be riding one in Ontario with our photo editor, Matt Stetson. And here on Vancouver Island, I'm riding the long travel Trek LX version. And we'll get into a bit about why Trek has decided to make that an option in the review, as well as in the podcast towards the end. So stay tuned.
I've heard the interview, and you guys do a great job of breaking down all the features. And one thing I think listeners should also look out for is not just the bike tech itself, but what I found interesting was how the way riders are riding right now on the trails and the trails that they're building, that is in turn influencing some of the choices that people at Trek are making when they are designing and speccing bikes. And I should also mention that, yes, I'm super stoked to read that upcoming review. This is a double barrel review. Terry and Matt Stetson, 2 opinions.
2 provinces.
2 tests, maybe 3 opinions. Who knows with you guys? But yeah, I'm very keen on editing and reading that when that comes out.
It's our first bi-coastal review.
I know, truly a nation-building review. This is amazing. I've yammered on a bit too long. There's lots of good stuff in this interview that you ran, Terry. So let's get into it with you and the folks from Trek.
So we're here with Ross Rushin and Dylan Howes and Taylor Cook from Trek to talk about the new expanded Trek Fuel platform. First off, thank you all for being here to talk to us about the new bikes today. Could you please tell us who you are and how you're connected to the Fuel project?
I can start. I'm Rushin, and I work in mountain bike marketing for Trek Bikes. And I am the one in charge of all of the photos and videos and words that you might see published about this bike. And I just kind of take what these guys make and get it out there to the world.
Awesome. And Dylan?
Hey there, I'm Dylan. I'm one of the senior engineers here at Trek in the mountain bike group. So that means I get to design bikes, and I've done everything from cross country to downhill. But my two favorites are these trail bikes like the Fuel and Sessions.
Awesome. And Taylor?
My name's Taylor Cook. I'm the marketing manager for Canada for Trek. I work out of the Canadian office and support the Canadian business.
So let's start with the basics of this platform. This isn't just the Fuel EX and an electric Fuel Plus anymore. It's now the Fuel, but with options for a Fuel EX, MX, and LX. Could you talk a little bit about where those two models fit into Trek's lineup?
Really, the goal with both of these bikes, Fuel EXE and Fuel EX, have always been kind of the most versatile trail bikes in our quiver. You know, the widest variety of the riders, the widest variety of terrain. And one of the big goals, the two goals were keep the award-winning characteristics, but also extend the versatility of the bikes. And so that's why you're hearing this naming, this Fuel and Fuel Plus, because in addition to Fuel EX and Fuel EXE, we've added different travel and wheel size configurations to suit a wider variety of riders.
So some of these new bikes sound like where the Remedy and the old non-high pivot Generation 5 Slash fit into the lineup. Will those bikes disappear, or are they staying on?
You hit it on the head there, where we were, and we haven't had the Remedy in the lineup for quite a few years, but we do still hear about it. And you're absolutely right, that Fuel MX version, which is a 150, 160, 27, or mullet bike, that does fill that Remedy hole in our lineup. And then again, you're exactly right. The LX version with 160, 170 full 2.9er, it really does fill that Slash Gen 5 position. And it's that long travel version for someone who's not quite ready for a high pivot. Or I don't know about you, but I hear a lot about high pivot skeptics. And so that Fuel LX really gives us an option for that customer that wants a full 2.9er, that wants that much travel, but just doesn't really want to deal with high pivot yet. So to answer your question about whether these bikes will push out the other bikes, Remedy was already kind of out, and then we fill that gap. And we will continue to sell the Slash Gen 6 with the high pivot, at least for another year or two. So we don't see it pushing that out. We just see it as another option for a rider in that travel range.
Yeah, having ridden both, they're very different bikes that both have like really interesting purposes. So I'm excited to see the LX coming in. And that's actually the bike I'll be testing. So the real new part about this is all of these three fuels, EX, MX, and LX, all use the same base frame, and you can switch between them if you want, with the new linkage and for the LX shock and fork. So it's kind of three models, but it's also kind of all a fuel. Why did Trek want to develop this adaptable frame design all under the Fuel name?
You know, a lot of it was just in the name of simplicity and making it easier for our customers and our retailers. We will sell the majority of these bikes as the Fuel EX. That does still remain the widest customer base, is that 145 travel 2.9er. However, now we're just giving them more options.
So along with the expansion to three models, there's a lot of practical changes to the Fuel frame, more broadly compatible headset, updated storage compartment, quieter chainstay guards, and crucially for taller people like me, the ability to run longer dropper posts, and that extends down the size ranges, as well as a 200-gram drop in frame weight. So how much of this project is refining what the Fuel EX was, and how much of this project was expanding the Fuel line to cover the more aggressive use case of MX and LX versions?
That's a super good question. And I think it's a great time to kick it over to Dylan, because Dylan has been involved in this project from the start. I don't want to call him a mastermind. I think that's a big word. But he's been here lockstep. So I'll kick it over to Dylan to elaborate a little bit more on that, especially on the geometry part.
So I've worked on the last few Fuel EXs, and I was the engineer for the project on the 23 Fuel EX, a previous generation. So a lot of this, at least very much in the EX configuration, it's taking on what that bike was. So we haven't really changed it. We've just built on it. One of the goals we started was, hey, how do we get longer and longer droppers in there? So the layout kind of came around, okay, if we just made the seat tube straight all the way, how do you fit in the linkage? How do you fit in the shock? How does everything package? So that drove some of those items. Somewhere early on in the development, it was, hey, could we get a remedy out of this frame? And then, well, boy, it's kind of close. I bet we could get the old slash back. Yeah, some of those, especially the remedy, was driven internally just because we were fans of the remedy, and how could we bring it back? And if we did, what would it be? And a mixed wheel was kind of the obvious thing we would do. A little bit of that also came from prior work with teams like the Enduro team. Just they were constantly looking for something different or something more or more options depending on the race course. There were times they used the new slash, the high pivot. It worked great. There were times that they rode modified Fuel EXs that we increased the travel just a little bit depending on the course. So this was kind of helping to fill in that gap, give the team, give riders, customers the option for, like Russ said, having the Gen 5 slash back. As we got into that, it kind of became this thing of like, well, you can get there by swapping rocker links and shock mounts. And we'd been doing the shock mounts already on the slash. So this was just expanding it. And then as you start configuring these things, go, oh, well, if we move this way, you can get this geometry out of the bike. You can adjust the frame up, down, and kind of keep joining that shock and linkage with those same mainframe seat stay, chain stay. And then by using the links and the lower shock mount, you can reposition the shock to get exactly the leverage rate you want. So you're not just moving something around and going, oh, this leverage rate is pretty close. It might work. We can get back to like, no, this is our targeted exact leverage rate that we want. And from there, a lot of the other things like the changing of the headset, that was just driven by us going, well, what other options are there? They're more off-the-shelf options. We've still got the plus or minus 1 degree option in this. It's just we've changed from our custom-designed oval upper to a ZS49 press fit standard. So there's a bunch of other options off the shelf already for somebody who wants to upgrade to a fancy bling headset. There's a lot of options. So just trying to increase those options for the customer. And then shorter seat tubes was something we all wanted. I ride a large and I can comfortably fit a 225 dropper on mine. So it's just shorter straight seat tubes let you maximize that dropper. And then find kind of the final update we did to the frame was taller head tubes on some of the bigger sizes. Raising that up, following trends, following better fit. I guess the last change is we've historically done double XL size in the Fuel EX before, but we've always done it in aluminum. This year we switched to the double XL is in carbon, not in aluminum. So it just gives more options for that higher end customer and the really tall person coming in wanting a bike. It's a little more enticing to go, well, you were looking at an alloy frame, but hey, we could step you up to this carbon one, then try to downsell that enthusiast customer to an alloy frame if they came in looking for carbon.
As a tall person, that's appreciated.
Well, and as a tall person, we did do some adjustment to the stack height on larger sizes in particular to modernize that stack height, and that way taller riders don't have to run big stack heights or big bars. So Dylan, I was hoping you would maybe touch on that just a little bit, that adjustment in and stack height on these bikes.
Yeah, that was the taller head tubes that I was referring to. So taller head tubes, taller stack height. Small, medium stayed about where they were. Those were fitting well. The large grew a bit, and then extra large and double XL grew quite significantly. Just reducing the number of spaces a rider has to run. And a lot of people were already running high rise bars, and higher rise bars are becoming more and more of a trend. So instead of using those higher rise bars just to get to a normal position, the increased stack helps with that fit and just gives somebody taller even more options to actually make use of those higher rise bars instead of just using them to get to a baseline fit. You can custom tune your fit a bit better.
And then at the other end of the size range, the Fuel MX has two purposes. More aggressive riders, the one like a faster handling bike that works better for jumping, but also for Fuel MX or Fuel EX riders that want the smaller back wheel. So those are potentially diverging use cases, with small riders sometimes being lighter, but not always being less aggressive on the bike. Is there the range in the Fuel X's tuning options with the headset, the shock, the linkage to adapt to both of those riders?
Yeah, so I can speak to that. If you start with a Fuel MX, that part of the reasoning behind using rocker links and lower shock mounts to adjust for wheel size and geometry is to make sure that the geometry and especially the leverage rate are tuned to that application. However, one kind of anomaly is that within the Fuel EX line, the size small does come with an MX rocker link and a 27.5 rear wheel. So it does have this, it is basically an MX out of the box, except it doesn't have the 160 fork. That's the main difference. But not all of these bikes are orderable through Project One. And we do see a pretty high volume in bikes like the Fuel EX5 or the Fuel EX8 or the Fuel EX97. And those will be EXs out of the box. But through our research, our rider research, we know that normally a size small rider wants either a 27.5 or a mullet. And so knowing that we're going to sell the majority of the bikes in a box with the Fuel EX, we decided to give those riders what we think they'll want right out of the box. Most of those riders will be very stoked that they don't have to change their rocker links or rear wheel. They get a mullet right out of the box. There's going to be a few riders on the taller end of that size range that might want a full 29er. And the size small frame is completely compatible with a full 29er. It's just that we feel like most riders will want a mullet. So they can easily swap back to a 29er if they want, utilizing the aftermarket rocker links, throwing a 29-inch rear wheel in there. But they can also order it as a full 29er in the LX flavor through Project One if they're going for one of those models. That part on the size small gets a little bit murky, but the main goal that we had in mind was the right bike for that rider out of the box. And we were okay with that. We were okay with that compromise of having like a little bit of a confusing story, just knowing that most of those riders would get the right bike out of the box.
Yeah, I have some shorter friends that have recently been trying the mullet bikes, and they've all been pretty stoked on it. So that'll be great.
Well, it can be a hassle to source a rear wheel and a tire and do all the rigmarole. And yeah, like I said, we found that most of that size rider likes a mullet, so let's give them what they want right away.
Switching over to the Fuel LX, moving in where the Gen 5 was, I kind of mentioned before that I was happy to see that bike come back as a longer travel trail bike that's maybe not a race bike, although we are seeing some enduro teams using the smaller bikes for some races. But that's quite a bit different than the 145 travel Fuel EX for use case. How do you manage that with one frame? What did you have to do anything to the last generation of Fuel EX frame to make it stand up to use with a 170 fork and longer travel, more aggressive riding?
Yeah, that was part of the project is with the longer fork. Essentially what we're doing there is testing to those higher standards. So even though it means the EX configuration carries a bit more weight now because it can handle all the way up to that 170 fork, but it does give all those riders more confidence. Hey, this is just an overall more durable, stronger bike. But through careful designing of that layup, the tube shapes, trying to reduce weight wherever we could, the frame overall is lighter than what it was. So we kind of got that lighter and stronger, got to have them both. But the big one is just designing that layup to pass those tests with a much longer fork.
Awesome. So it's tested to like LX standards.
It's pretty common to, I think a lot of us tend to push our bikes above what they're advertised for, right? Like we see that a lot with downcountry bikes and pushing them farther than what they may be intended for. And I think it gives that type of a rider that much more confidence knowing that, we did test this frame to that extreme standard. And even if you're running the 145 EX version, you do still have that like same durability that you get with that longer travel version.
And then you briefly mentioned Project One, and with the fuel line, Project One MTB is launching, which takes that program in a bit of a different direction than we're used to from the past and from Project One on the road, where it's more about giving riders more options in parts than in just like paint color. Could you talk a little bit about why Trek is moving the mountain bike side of Project One in that direction?
So this was like a year or two kind of process where we're always listening to our customers, whether that's a consumer or a retailer. Always trying to get better and find out like what makes them more successful, because if they're more successful, then we are too. And this really started from it was started as kind of an objection overcomer. So when we would talk to high-end mountain bike retailers about like, well, why aren't you selling Trek at the high end? We would get some pretty small objections. It was never the frame. It was always, well, you guys don't have Maxxis tires, or you guys don't have a coil shock option. There was always kind of these like really small objections that we noticed a trend that all of these objections were things that we could overcome with a Project One program. And so that's how it started. And so we've had mountain bikes in Project One many times before. And that's another piece of it. We realized that mountain bikers are more into parts and how the bike rides, and less in, not that they're not into paint, but it's less important than a lot of the road stuff that we see. And we haven't seen too many mountain bikers that want to pay $1,000 for a paint job that's going to get scraped up when they take a tumble. And so they're way more into parts than paint. And so that's where we decided to revamp the Project One program for mountain bikes to address those concerns specifically. And also with this new fuel setup, it was just ripe for integrating into Project One. Like, how are we going to sell these 3 different configurations, right? And so it just made it a really great fit for revamping or just reintroducing mountain bike Project One. And so the main mechanism is being able to let customers buy a Fuel EX, Fuel MX, or Fuel LX right off the bat. They get the bike they need right out of the box. But then we decided to take it a little bit further and address some of those common objections that we heard. And so that's where, a customer will start with one of those 3 flavors. Also, they'll start each platform has 4 drivetrains to choose from. And then they can buy the bike just like that, or they can go and further customize it. So we'll offer Maxxis Pirelli tires. We'll offer race-based handlebars. We'll even offer any of these bikes with coil shocks, which is a really big one. So we're really excited about that. And we also hope to expand that offering in the future. Right now, it is just kind of overcoming those objections. Like, I want to overfork, I want Maxxis tires. We do hope to offer more, Oleans or, more bougie options in the future. But right now, we're just trying to get this off the ground and get people the bikes they need, and then we'll expand it in the future.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. This is potentially expanding to like smaller or more boutique companies in the future?
That's the plan. Yeah, TBD. We kind of got to get this going and see how it goes. And then there's obviously a lot of negotiations that have to happen as far as how the back end systems work. But yeah, we will continue to increase our bespoke offerings for mountain bikes.
Switching to the Fuel Plus, which is no longer Fuel EXE. The big changes for that are, all of the same frame updates, but also the move to the new, more powerful TQ HPR60 motor, but also the move to a larger 580 watt-hour battery from the Fuel EXE's 360 watt-hour battery. What was the discussion about like the balance between range and weight for making that change for the second generation of this bike?
The EXE was designed to be as light as possible. And I think we started finding people really love this level of power because it just has that feel of being closer to a normal ride, a little bit closer to feeling like you're just in the best shape of your life, but you are still riding and working. You're not just along for the ride on a full powered e-bike. But people wanted to go further and further. And so as that battery got developed for the Slash Plus, and people like that, it was kind of just the obvious choice for this. The great part about it is with the increased efficiency in that HPR 60 and the better efficiency of the cells in the 580 battery, even though the battery is not twice what it is, you'll easily get twice the range that a rider would have gotten out of that 360 battery before.
So even though the power is going up on the motor, the range is still going up overall?
Yeah. So it's
there's a test that I recently learned about called the R200. Dylan, correct me if I'm wrong. The R200 simplified range comparison.
Yeah.
And apparently, it is a standardized test across the industry to measure distance per watt hour.
Yeah.
And based on that testing, we're finding that the range for HPR 60 with the more efficient motor and the bigger battery, like Dylan said, is twice as what you would have gotten with Fuel EXE.
And then does that change in the battery construction apply to the optional 360 watt-hour battery too? Or is that the same old battery?
No, that's the same battery it was, and that is still compatible in this bike. So if you really wanted the lighter weight, that's still an option. We've just found that the relatively small increase in the battery weight, at least the increase in the battery weight, is a relatively small increase in the overall bike weight percentage. And people are just more than happy to take that extra bit of weight for the increased range, reduced range anxiety, more rides between charges kind of thing.
Sounds good. To zoom out a little bit, when I was getting ready for this, I went back and looked at some of the old Fuel EX models. And back in 2009, which is admittedly a few years ago now, the Fuel EX was still a trail bike, but that meant it was like a 120 travel aimed more at endurance riding or racing. Now that's where the top fuel is at. And the Fuel EX is 145 at the base with options all the way up to like 160. I know it's been a gradual move across, but what is Trek seeing in the change in the way that people use trail bikes or understand trail bikes that have kind of caused this slow generational shift?
I think customers are just riding more and more aggressive terrain as we've gotten better at designing these bikes. Back in 2009, a 150-ish travel bike, that was a fairly big bike. And people were like, oh, well, that's kind of almost a downhill bike, or maybe I don't really want to climb with that bike. Just as bikes have gotten overall more efficient, the amount of travel you can use at that same efficiency has gone up. And so then as the travel goes up, it sort of keeps opening up more and more terrain. And I think as mountain bikers have all grown and gotten used to more and more suspension, travel numbers have just gone up across the board. Cross country bikes are now kind of that 120 bike, and part of that is again the increased efficiency of the bikes, and also to handle the bigger, gnarlier cross country courses that we're seeing these days. So I think it's just sort of matching customers' expectations of a little bit more capable, but without giving up that efficiency.
Well, I think another piece of that is the modern trail building. Back in '09, we were still relying a lot on rustic, hand-built trails, slower speeds. And now that we're seeing this kind of, I don't know if I could call it a renaissance, but I mean, you guys have seen the amount of trail building that's going on globally. And now we're seeing a lot more trails that are being purpose built for mountain bikes rather than repurposing hiking trails. And I think that is another factor in, why we would want a longer travel bike now is, we're doing much higher speeds.
Yeah, and probably those two things have fed each other. That's just the bikes get better, so we build more trails. So we want better bikes, and it's
Some people call it a vicious cycle. I call it a virtuous cycle.
yes, exactly, a fun cycle.
Okay, and then for our review of this bike, we're actually testing 2 fuels in Ontario at our head office. We have our photo editor, Matt Stetson, riding the Trek Fuel EX. And then out here on Vancouver Island, I'm riding the Fuel LX. That's more than just a chance to try both ends of the bike in kind of terrain that suits them, with the platform allowing users to switch between bikes. We're effectively riding the same bike. Taylor, do you want to talk a little bit about why that makes sense for like maybe someone in Ontario looking at this platform?
Yeah. So we wanted to take the opportunity to showcase the versatility of the bike in 2 different areas. The link between those is that you get the chance to, if you're based in Ontario and you're doing a trip to BC, or you're going somewhere where there's that more elevation or that steeper terrain needing more travel, you can make those modifications with the bike. And inversely, if you're on the West Coast and you want to dial into something a little more lighter trail focused, then you can make those modifications the other way as well. So you really got instead of needing a separate bike for that, maybe 1 or 2 times a year when you need it, you can make some pretty modest swaps to the bike to take advantage of that versatility and really ride the bike that's best suited to where you're going to be riding.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's not like a quick trail side fix that you're going to do on Saturday. Like if you're going all the way from EX to LX, you need a new shock and a new fork.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about like a big road trip that you've been building up to for like a year or something, that is definitely less than a new bike, and you get to like ride on your bike instead of like a rental bike. That's kind of the idea, right?
Totally. Yeah. You can make that adjustment. And yeah, depending on the exact bike you've picked, you may or may not need a different fork depending on what comes on the bike. But yeah, you've got lots of great options without needing to change a whole bunch.
Yeah, I think that's all I have for today, unless there's anything that you guys really wanted to talk about.
This was a great talk, and I always love being on a call with Dylan.
Oh, likewise, Ross.
Glad I could help you spend more time together.
Yeah, thanks for all the great questions, Terry. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys think about the bikes we sent you guys. You guys are in a unique perspective to have 2 editors on 2 bikes at different locations, which is so ideal for telling this story. So I really look forward to hearing your experiences. And of course, if you need any rocker links and you want to do the conversions yourself, we're happy to accommodate that as well.
Sweet. Awesome.
And that's the episode. Terry McKall did most of the work. I would say 90% of the work on this episode. And usually I say I wrote and edited it. I did not do any writing. I did do some editing. But thank you, Terry, so much for all the heavy lifting you did on this episode.
Yeah, it was a really interesting chance to talk to Ross and Dylan about how they're changing the Trek platform, or the Trek Fuel platform, to bring all the trail bikes together.
Also, thanks to Matt Hansen. He's not on this episode, but his influence is everywhere. This episode of the Canadian Cycling Magazine podcast is produced by Adam Killick. He does the music too. Also, thanks to Ontario Creates for its support. So, Terry, Matt Stetson, not Matt Hansen. Listeners, you'll remember we have too many Matts over here, but Matt Stetson will be riding the Fuel EX. Terry, you've got the LX over there. What do you anticipate? Maybe what do you sense you are going to see out on the trails with your bike?
With my bike, it's bringing a lot from the Trek Slash before that bike went to high pivot, and that bike always kind of towed a line between a longer travel trail bike and a race bike. So I'm excited to see what this version of that bike looks like. Just having fun out on the trails, and maybe pushing the capabilities of the Fuel EX a little bit further than last time.
All right. Well, I look forward to your insights, Terry. I look forward to hearing from Matt Stetson. Thanks again. And listeners, thank you very much for listening. Ride safely, and we'll talk to you later.